Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to give you an update on CalPADS today, and with me, I'm just going to let her introduce myself, although she absolutely needs no introduction, in my opinion.
Oh, thank you. Good morning. I guess it's still morning. It's hard for me to keep track anymore. Um, Everyone, my name is Shiloh Duncan Bessereel. I'm super excited to see 600 people coming onto this webinar or more. For my permanent job is the data administrator for special education. And right now I'm also the interim associate director for special education. So a few hats that I'm wearing right now, but I was just joking with Brandy the other day. I was like, I miss our little road shows that we do all around the state. So this feels like home for me, and I'm really excited for us to talk about all the stuff that's coming. I don't know if, it feels exciting, but we miss you guys.
Yes, we do. So any questions, you can contact either of us afterwards. And like I said, we will be responding to the Q&A. Just some resources here for you. Obviously, by now, hopefully all of you have seen our coronavirus information resources page on the CDE's website. That is available. The other really cool thing that our partners at CSIS have done is they've put together step-by-step videos on some of the error resolution. And this is a really good resource for all of you SPED data coordinators that work in SACE. Specifically for the certification validation errors, it walks you step-by-step through how to resolve some of the most common errors that we see. And then also, if you are not signed up for the CalPADS listserv, this is one of the biggest issues. We did take the opportunity to automatically put you on the listserv if you have a CalPADS account. But if you have anybody else who thinks they would benefit from the information coming out in the CalPADS flashes, because we do have lots of special education information in there, please sign up for the CalPADS listserv via the link on this page. Okay, so wanted to give you some information on some known issues. So if you are receiving any of these certification errors, and in some cases, some of these input validation errors in SACE, please understand that they are being either worked on, some of them have been resolved, but even though it says fix available on the known issues list, please understand that sometimes it means that it has to go out in our next release. Okay, so let's see, CERT 19, there are some invalid fatal CERT 19 errors. CERT 132, that has been a sticking point. We know that if that has not already been patched, it's going to be patched very, very soon. 143 has some issues, as well as 161, 160, 142, 141. The GER 5 has some issues, and then finally SPED 542. So again, we do have some known issues. Please keep monitoring the known issues page so that you understand when a fix is available. It will likely go in. When it disappears from that page, then you're all good. You should not see those certification validations anymore unless they're actually valid. Okay, so we wanted to walk through some of the most common SPED validation errors that you guys are getting this year. You may have noticed when you started submitting your transactions for the 2021 academic year that you started seeing a lot of errors that you'd never seen before. And that's because we implemented some new ones. We analyzed the data last year and found out that there was some weird stuff going on, but I'm sure I don't need to tell you guys that. So the first two I want to talk about are SPED 538 and SPED 539. So SPED 538 is education plan amendment date cannot exist between the dates of another SPED record. And then 539 is that the meeting date cannot exist between or before the dates of another LEA SPED record. So I want to show you some examples of where we saw these. Okay, so in this case, let's look at a SPED 538 scenario. So record 1 is represented by the blue outline. So you'll see that the amendment date in record 1 occurs after the 11/22/2019 meeting, which is the record above it. Okay, so here we've got 3 triennial evaluations, and these are all submitted by the same district, by the way. Okay, and so here we have an amendment that occurs on the 25th of February 2020. okay? But there was meeting held, another triennial meeting held on 11/22. So the 11/21 triennial can't have a 225 amendment. The amendment actually needs to be made on the most recent record. So we would expect to see that amendment date put on the 11/22 meeting record. Okay, so it's just really there's a lot of inconsistencies. So I want to show you a SPED 539 scenario. Okay, in this case, a new LEA is trying to submit a SPED record with a meeting date of February 11th, 2020. However, the prior LEA in CALPADS has a record with an amendment date of March 30th, 2020. Okay, so in this case, what you see on the right-hand side of the screen is what the LEA is trying to submit. What you see on the left-hand side of the screen is what is already in CALPADS. Okay, so how do we resolve this? So in this case, the new LEA, which is the record that's being submitted, needs to adopt the February 11th, 2020 record with the March 30th, 2020 amendment date. Okay, so that's the way you get around this. You can't send up a record on 2/11 with no amendment. Okay, because this is actually, the top record is actually the most recent record. And therefore, we would expect the new LEA to adopt that record rather than adopting the prior IEP. Okay. The other thing that I did want to say about SPED 539 is that we do know SACE is going to be considering some changes to how this is handled. And when they get more details on that, they are going to make this information available to you. All right, SPED 438 is another really, really common error. Okay, so why do you get this error? There are a couple of scenarios in which you get this error. Okay, so the first scenario is that the LEA is trying to amend a plan. You're trying to send up an amendment for a plan that doesn't exist in CALPADS for that same LEA. Okay, so an LEA can only make amendments to a plan that it actually owns. Okay, so if you don't have the original plan with that same meeting date in there and no amendment date, then CALPADS does not allow you to send that up. And the way we do that is we compare the record you're sending in with all of the fields you see here. So here we have education plan type. So if it's an IEP, it has to have the same reporting LEA and CELPA, the same meeting date, referral date, meeting type code, so if it's an annual or a triennial, initial evaluation parental consent, and parental involvement facilitation code. All of those things have to be in the same in the record you're sending up, okay? And you have to have made you have to be making an amendment to a record with all of the same fields populated in CALPADS. Okay, so that's the first scenario. The second scenario, so the example here that I have is the student transfers to a new LEA. The LEA meets and makes an amendment to the IEP and then tries to submit the amendment record. Okay, so you've got a new student transferring in, and then after the student gets there, 2 weeks later, you go ahead and hold a meeting and you're trying to send up the amendments that you made during that meeting. But SPED 438 is going to trigger because you haven't adopted the IEP as it existed when the student enrolled in your district. Okay, so essentially you're just adopting what was in place at the time that the student enrolled. So the resolution in this case is that you have to first adopt the prior LEA's IEP, if it's an IEP, and then you would submit your subsequent amendment after that. Okay, again, LEAs cannot amend plans that they don't own technically. Okay, so the second scenario is when an LEA is trying to submit a plan that doesn't exist in CALPADS at all. So you're trying to submit an amendment for a plan that doesn't exist in the system. There's no record for it. So what we're looking for is a record in CALPADS with the same plan type, amendment date, meeting date, referral date, meeting type, initial evaluation parental consent, and parental involvement. You'll notice that in this case, the CELPA and LEA are not part of that equation. So if there's no record at all with these fields populated, you cannot submit an amendment, okay? There has to be an existing record with all of those same components in order for you to send up an amendment for that. And so that's why SPED 438 triggers. All right, so scenario 2, example. So a student transfers to a new LEA. The LEA meets and makes an amendment to the IEP and tries to submit the amendment record. The most recent special education record in CALPADS from the prior LEA was an amended IEP. Okay, so SPED 438 in this case is going to trigger because the new LEA is trying to amend a plan it doesn't own. So again, you need to adopt the most recent record and then make subsequent amendments to it once you meet. Okay, that's always best practice. When a student transfers in, you should be adopting the most recent version of their IEP from the prior LEA. All right, so some considerations. So currently, SACE does not allow the adoption of an amendment transaction when a student transfers, which is part of the reason that you guys are getting these errors, okay? However, they are going to be working on functionality to allow you to adopt the most recent transaction, which includes amendments. And Christy, did you want to say anything about that?
Just get off mute real quick. Yes, so definitely as we found out this information that the most recent IEP could also include, any subsequent amendments to that IEP meeting, we will be creating functionality in the system to allow amendments to be adopted. And once that's available, then yes, we will let everybody know.
Okay, great. So moving on to SPED 540. So this is a brand new one this year as well. Special education program exit date cannot be populated for a triennial meeting. So the first thing that I wanted to say is, does it mean you have to change your local business process so that you can never exit a student from special education in a triennial? And the answer is no, man, you don't have to change your business process. We realize that that's actually the purpose of that meeting. The purpose of the meeting of a triennial is to establish continued eligibility for the special education program. So if you determine the student to be ineligible, you can exit them during a triennial. But what you see on the screen here is the reason that we implemented this validation. So first of all, last year, what we figured out, it was the beta year, the first year that we were collecting this information. And it was so complex to try and identify the record that was effective on information day, because these triennials oftentimes were, there were exits that appeared on these triennials that didn't also appear on the students' other plans. And so that's why you guys were having a lot of problems with 16.1 and 16.2 last year, because there were too many records, and CALPADS was not really good at figuring out which one was the one that should be included in 16.1 and 16.2. So we made a decision to only count annuals and initial evaluation, so meeting types 20, 10, or 15, in 16.1 and 16.2. So CALPADS will only look at those records when we're counting kids in 16.1 and 16.2. Therefore, the most recent information about that student should appear on their most recent annual or initial record, okay? And that includes exits. So if the student has exited special education, you can exit the student in the triennial meeting in SACE, and then SACE will take that exit and populate it on the most recent annual record in SACE, and that transaction will be sent up to CALPADS. Okay, so just wanted to make you aware of why we implemented that validation. Okay, so if your annuals and triennials are held on the same day and you have indicated as such in SACE, meaning you've identified the meeting as an annual and a triennial, then SACE will also generate a new meeting type 20 with that exit date, and it will be sent up to CALPADS. And Christy, if you have anything to chime in, please feel free, okay? And Shiloh, you too, but I know you will, so.
Yeah, I know, you know, we're not going to be able to answer, I think, time-wise, because we still have a lot of content to go through. I'm seeing a lot of questions come in into the Q&A. You know, there should be policies and procedures about how folks adopt things, but in terms of a triennial piece, we still want folks to upload triennials. So I think that's a misconception I've seen kind of whittled throughout, like, we're not supposed to upload triennials anymore. No, that's kind of not what's happening here. It's just how, when you have a student exit it, we're going to be pulling that exited record into the system so you all can see it. So please continue to upload triennials.
Okay, Cert 167 and 168, these have caused a lot of angst. So number one, the U.S. Department of Education now requires that kindergarten students that are students with disabilities that are at least 5 years old and in kindergarten be placed in a school age setting rather than an early childhood setting. So if you've got students whose most recent record that overlaps census day in CALPADS are 5 years old as of census day and their grade level is kindergarten, if you have not updated their least restrictive environment settings to be school age, you are going to get Cert 167 and Cert 168. So Cert 167 is that you haven't populated the general education participation range code. And then Cert 168 is that the setting is not a school age setting for that student. Okay, so these are the definitional changes that will be posted in the CALPADS code sets. I believe next week we're posting a new version of the CALPADS file specifications as well as the code sets, but you'll see that code 201 now is for regular early childhood program, and it only includes any kindergarten students that are less than 5 years old. So your early TK kids that are 4 years old should remain in a regular early childhood program. Any student that is kindergarten grade level and 5 years old should be placed in a school age setting, now including regular classroom or public day school. Okay, so how to resolve Cert 167 and 168. What you need to do, and there's guidance that we're getting ready to send out in Flash 193 that should be going out on Monday. So please look for that. And if you're not signed up for this listserv, make sure you sign up for the listserv and you will receive the Flash. But the guidance that we're providing is that you need to submit an amendment on the most recent IEP meeting record that overlaps census day with an amendment date that represents the first day of kindergarten for the student for the 2021 academic year. Okay, so a lot of these kids, their annual IEPs may not be due until November. And so they actually are 5 on census day. So you're saying now you want us to go back and submit an amendment for that meeting. And the answer is yes, they were in that setting. So Shiloh, go ahead. I know that.
Yeah, so this is sort of an ongoing problem that we've had for years and years. And so you would have a student, you'd hold an IEP for them, like let's say in March, that was when their annual was. So you'd still have their preschool LRE categories listed in there. And then they would start kindergarten. They would turn 6 probably like in November. And so you'd still have to report some of those. You'd still have sort of listed on their IEP the preschool least restrictive in settings. And then last year we were telling people, okay, their birth date becomes the date in which you change that over. So all we're asking folks to do now is just that date in which you're changing the LRE is now the first day of kindergarten to reflect, I think, what is probably much more accurate, which is that they're in a school age setting and that they are experiencing both a school age environment. So this is really a righting of the ship by the US Department of Education to be able to reflect that. So this is, I don't know if it's necessarily new. I think it's just a change in the way that we're reporting it now.
Okay. So for SACE users, there's some really specific guidance. So first of all, if the student's most recent meeting, if there hasn't been any amendments made to that meeting, or if you don't have a meeting that has occurred after census day, and you know you've got their annual IEP record from last year, and again, no amendments have been made to it, no meetings after census day haven't been held, you can actually submit an amendment to that most recent IEP that again, what, as Shiloh said, would represent the student's first day in kindergarten for the 2021 academic year. Okay, and in some cases, if the student turns 5 after the start of the school year, you could actually make that amendment effective on their 5th birthday. Okay. So if an amendment date is populated, so you have an amended meeting and that's the most recent record, or if you've already held a meeting and that meeting date was after Census Day, you're going to have to contact SACE for specific guidance on how to get those amendments in there. We are not planning on making these warnings. Okay, they are intended to stay fatal errors.
Yeah, we can't make it a warning because we have to report this data to the U.S. Department of Education. They provide us no wiggle room around that. So it's vitally important that we have this information in there.
Got it. All right, so here are some additional Fall 1 new validations that we're doing. These don't seem to be causing LEAs too much grief. These are not some of our most prevalent errors, so I'm just going to go through them really quickly. So the special education exit date has to be populated on the latest SPED record. So if you have an IEP, student's IEP, and then you made an amendment to that IEP, the expectation is that the exit's going to be populated on that amended record. Invalid field population for education plan type 700, 800, or 900. Basically, folks, if kids have plan type 700, 800, and 900, it basically means they're not going to be served. And therefore, many of the fields that you typically populate on a student that actually will have an IEP or an ISP, we don't need that information. So minimally, we're talking about referral date, parental consent date, meeting date, plan type, and that's pretty much it, right? You don't need any of the other information, including primary residence category. We don't need it for those kids. 530, 531 and 532. I can just tell you that we are making a change to 531 and 532 because right now it's triggering for State Board of Education charters. And if you're a State Board of Education charter and you're getting this error, we are making changes to it so that because it should not trigger for you guys. But basically what this does is it says if you're a charter LEA for special education purposes, then you have to be an independently reporting charter in CALPADS. Okay, so it's not too many of these. Disability 2 must be null if disability 1 is null. So we're just validating those data because in the data last year, we saw that you were populating disability 2 with none and then leaving disability 1 blank. And if disability 1 is blank, disability 2 must always be blank. Initial SPED 546, initial record cannot match annual records on meeting dates. You can't have an initial evaluation on the same day as you have an annual or an amendment, okay? And then finally, SPED 547, just so you know, SPED 547, we will be discussing decreasing this to a warning. Meeting and amendment date cannot be on the same date because many of you have written in and said, yes, it can. We actually affirmed an IEP, parents signed, and then we figured out there was an error in the IEP, and then we made those changes in the very, very same day. So that is a real scenario. So we will be probably decreasing that to a warning. Okay, we have a new special education service location code, virtual location. So if you have students receiving their services virtually, please make sure that you utilize that code. You guys asked for it, so please utilize it. Special education program exit reasons 71, 74, and 77 have been retired. Now, I want to be really clear about this. You can still use those codes in SACE. You can still use them. It's just SACE is not sending those codes up to CALPADS because if they get up there, then you get this, you get an error saying these codes are not valid anymore. Okay. The reason we don't accept these anymore is because it's duplicative of what we see in the student enrollment record. Cert 136, 37, and 39. You're no longer going to see these errors. And that's the late tries, late annuals, and the late 60-day timelines. Okay, so you're not going to see those errors anymore as part of certification. What you need to do is make sure that you are utilizing the monitoring reports 16.7 and 16.8 to verify which students have late annuals, late tries, and late 60-day evaluations. We are still working out some kinks with the monitoring reports, but the other thing I wanted to clarify about the monitoring reports is that, folks, these are refreshed every time you send up transactions and post transactions to CalPADS. Okay, so there is no, weekly we refresh those reports. They're refreshed every single time you post transactions to CalPADS. They're operational data store reports, which means they work on the most current data in CalPADS. Okay, we did change the name for data element, sorry, not date element, data element 1.34. So 1.34, just so you know, is in the student enrollment record. It's not in SACE, okay? But the reason we're telling you about it is because it specifically affects students in transition programs. So if you have adult age students with disabilities in transition, you need to work with your student information system data coordinator to ensure that those students with disabilities in this field have been marked as adult age students with disabilities in transition. Okay, the old name that we had for it was post-secondary transition status indicator, and people got super confused because we collect a file called post-secondary status. So we changed it. Corey Stacy actually recommended this name change, so thank you, Corey. Adult age students with disabilities and transition, and that belongs in the student enrollment file. We have made the following operational data store or ODS extracts available to your CELPAs now. So the SPED extract, the SSRV or services extract, and the District of Special Education Accountability extract. I do know per CSIS that we do have an issue with the District of Special Education Accountability extract at the CELPA level, and they are working on resolving that. But just know that those extracts are available to CELPAs now. And also just a reminder that you need to certify report 16.5, which is your services. You weren't required to do it last year, but you are required to do it this year. And when I say last year, I mean last year for fall 1. There is some new functionality that should be made available in SACE if it hasn't already, and Christy can probably give you an update on this. But now instead of having to log into CalPADS to view your certification errors, we are sending a file down to SACE with those certification errors for you. Okay, and so I do not know whether or not SACE is making those visible to you yet, but Christy will probably update you and let you know at what point they will make them available in SACE. The other thing that I wanted to point out, however, is that don't worry about certification validation errors until you've got all your data in there. That's like the last step in validating your data in CalPADS. Okay, then the other thing is we implemented a new field in our SSID extract. So the SSID extract is basically a baseline set of information you can get about the students that are enrolled in your LEAs when they newly enroll in your district, or for any set of SSIDs that were enrolled during a specific period of time. Usually the student information system coordinator will download the SSID extract. And it's a baseline set of information that you have about that student that you can upload into your student information system. And so this year, at the request of both CELPAs and LEAs, we added a new column to that extract that is an indication of whether or not the student's on an active IEP, ISP, or IFSP. Okay, so if there's a yes in the student with disability indicator column, it means that the student has an active plan in CalPADS and you need to create a transaction for them. Okay, but this information, generally the SSID extract is downloaded by your SIS coordinator. So you need to develop a local process so that information makes its way to the person that enters the data in SACE to create the transaction. Okay, you have to have a local process in place. The other thing that you can suggest is let the SIS coordinator teach you as the SPED data coordinator how to download the SSID extract yourself. Okay, then you take them completely out of the equation. You can get that information anytime you want. Okay, but this is a really cool way to identify students as soon as they transfer into your districts as students with disabilities. You don't have to wait for the CUME file. You don't have to wait for anything. And a lot of times, unfortunately, parents sometimes don't disclose the fact that their kids are on IEPs. CalPADS has that information. We are providing it to you, but you need to utilize it. Okay, coming soon, we are working on the CELPA level monitoring report. So We're hoping in the next couple of months to make these available to your CALPADS. Okay, just some FYIs. This is Shiloh's round.
Yes. So I saw a little bit of the peppering into the Q&A around, wait a second, we have, you sent us letters about students waiting on assessments. So just to give you an idea, we have a lot of concerns right now about students who are waiting on assessments and who've been waiting greater than 120 days. And we have a lot of them, a little more than 7,000 students waiting more than 120 days and some pushing 160 days waiting on assessments. And so we're encouraging districts to really work hard to try and assess those children. Obviously, this is much more programmatic, but what we also have found is that districts may have more records of students who are waiting on assessments than we have in CALPADS. And the reason for that is that they are not submitting pending records. So they're waiting to submit pending records until they hold the IEP, or they're waiting for some reason. Please do not wait on submitting your pending records. We need to get those up. It's the only way we know how many children are waiting on assessments. And it's become probably one of the hottest topics around in the special education policy world and advocacy world is the assessment issue. And it's hard for us to know what the story is if we don't know the data. So I really want to encourage folks to understand that once the parent signs a parent consent, that we need to have that pending record uploaded. Now, some folks may have said, well, wait a second, the data that you sent me in September didn't necessarily match what I see in SACE. And the reason that we did not send records of students and things like that is because there's lots of reasons why that data didn't match. For example, if you had just uploaded a record right after we pulled the data on September 15th, but we sent a letter probably at the end of September, I think it was September 24th. If you uploaded records during that time, obviously it wouldn't look accurate. The data in your system is probably the most accurate set of data about students who are waiting on assessments. So we're just really encouraging districts to look at that data first as a way to understand who is waiting on assessments and who needs to have assessments completed. So I just kind of want to encourage folks to look at that closely, but most importantly is to ensure that you are uploading all of your pending records as they come in. So when a parent signs a parent consent, send a pending record, do not wait to upload them. It's one of the best ways that we can understand what's happening in districts. So that is, so next slide. So we are still sort of, let me add all the chat and the QA open, so it's not helpful. I have to get all these things. So we are still getting students who are in a transition program, and they are being included inside of enrollment status or their grade level is adult, AD. Please do not put students who are on IEPs into a grade status of AD, that's adult. That is not appropriate. Students who are on IEPs can stay enrolled in a K-12 institution until they're age 22. And through that period of time, regardless of whatever program that they're experiencing, either they're trying to get a regular high school diploma, they're getting some vocational education, or they are receiving transitional services, they are grade 12. And so it's really important that we continue to have that existence. Like you have to put grade 12 for those students because we're still getting some of those students in adult grades. So that's really important, and that we would see primary enrollments for those children. So any child who has an IEP should have a primary enrollment. What we may see is there's students who are on IFSPs, that's children who are infants and toddlers who may be receiving services through an LEA or through a CELPA. They can have the non-ADA enrollment of 50, and also children who are on individualized service plans can also have an enrollment status of 50. No one else should have an enrollment status of 50, including children who are in transition programs. So it's really important to include that. And your preschool students should also not have an enrollment status of 50. So please make sure that only children who are ages 0 through 2, so 0, 1, and 2, and children who are on ISPs are the only ones who have an enrollment status of 50. Brandy, did you want to add anything else on this?
No, just that we're getting ready to implement some validations to prevent you guys from doing this. So enrollment status 50 has been relatively problematic. You guys are using it most prevalently with preschoolers, and preschool always equals primary because preschoolers will always be on an IEP, always. Okay.
So maybe you can put a little post-it note, IEP equals enrollment status, or yeah, enrollment status 10, always. Yes. So, so just that should be the best rule to follow. Okay, next slide. Okay. We are also getting some questions around County Offices of Education. So County Offices of Education should only report the special education and the enrollment records for students who are attending a county office school and for whom the county office is the service provider. Or if they're not attending a school in any other LEA, but they're receiving special education services through the county office. For example, if you have children who are receiving speech services from a county office, you can enroll them, even if they're not in a preschool there. So that's one way that you can do that. But if you have a child who is attending a regular school in a district, but they're receiving services from a county office of education, they're not, the county office is simply a service provider. They should not be reporting the record. So it's really about, where is the child enrolled? Are they enrolled with a county office school? Or are they enrolled in a regular district school and they're receiving services from a service provider that just happens to be the county office? If it is the latter situation, where they are attending a regular school and receiving services from a provider that is the county office of education, then the county office should not report them. So we do get some questions about this from time to time, and we wanted to clarify that. So I hope that helps. Brandy, was that everything on this? I think.
Yeah.
Okay, next slide. Oh, and if you guys have help and need help, please submit a CalPADS service desk ticket. It's probably the best way for you to get a lot of support. We are getting a lot of tickets that are coming in right now. And so obviously a patience of a day or two as we're sort of going through tickets is very helpful, but we do have sort of an all hands on deck around information and tickets. So if you do have questions that need to be answered or problems, please feel free. Apparently it's always whenever I'm presenting to apparently 730 people that my computer decides to notify me of everything that's happening. So I apologize about that, but we just kind of wanted to make sure that everyone's really aware of the CalPADS support desk and the availability of it. So I think that's the end of our presentation. When we were designing it, we were like, oh my God, we got to go so quickly because we don't have much time. This is a lot of content. So we are at that point at the end. Did we want to try and address any questions, Brandy? I know there's a lot in here. So.
Right. Yeah, there's some that can probably really quickly be answered. So so I want to start with Melissa Holm. So with regards to delay code, parent contact did not attend. Is this for initial IEPs only, or can this be used if a parent last minute notifies the team that she cannot attend or is a no-show for other meetings?
Yeah.
Well, the easy answer is in our valid code combinations document, we actually have a valid code combination. So depending on the meeting type and the plan type, there are only specific delay reasons you can use. So I would really urge you to go to the valid code combos to take a look at that. And that'll tell you your options.
Somebody was asking about virtual location code, like what does that mean? We should be providing it this way or that way. So the virtual location is tied to a service. It was a request from LEAs and CELPAs to add. It is sort of up to you how you use it. So if you are providing a service in a virtual environment, you can use it. If you choose not to do that, that's also fine as well. This was a requested field from CALPADS and LEAs. So, so that provides that. Brandy?
Okay. So we got lots of questions about what do you mean by adopting the record? So, okay. In CALPADS, each LEA has to establish ownership of a student's IEP when a student transfers in. Okay, so a lot of you have questions about, okay, well, what do you mean adopt that IEP? So if a student transfers from one LEA to another, when they enter your district, they are already on an active IEP. Now, can you actually provide those services and everything that's prescribed in that IEP? You don't know that yet, okay? But minimally, they're coming in on an active plan. So when we say adopt the IEP, again, work with SACE to figure out how to do this, but essentially what you're doing, and assuming that prior district was also a district that uses SACE, what SACE would assist in you doing is adopting the most recent plan for the student and making your LEA the owner of that. Now, does it mean that you're telling CDE, this is the IEP they were on, this is the services we provided? No, that's not what it's doing. That's just what's prescribed for the student based on that IEP. Now, if you meet a week or two later and you amend it based on a change in the student setting or based on a change in the services that you're going to provide, because that's what you can provide, then you submit up that amendment. But you first have to take ownership of the student's IEP by adopting what they came in with.
Yeah, and this aligns very closely with the requirements in law that you have choices when a student comes into your district, but no matter what, the child is in stay put. And so they have an IEP. You just have to provide ownership of that. And then you have some choices as an LEA is either we're going to hold an IEP and determine if to provide the services, or we're just going to say, you know, this IEP, we can provide everything in it. We're just going to adopt it. Those are options that are available within the law.
And just to be clear, I mentioned it, but a lot of you are also having this question. So there, right now in SACE, you cannot essentially adopt an affirmed amendment. You can't do that. But we had conversations with the team at SACE, and they will be working to try and make that change so you can actually adopt an affirmed amendment. So lots of questions about that. Right.
Yeah, I was seeing through.
Okay, a copy of the presentation. Christy, is the copy of the presentation uploaded to any sort of centralized site?
Yes, I was going to add in at the end that yes, if you go to the conference website where you clicked join session, where you see the session title, there's an attachment icon. So you just click on that attachment icon and that is the materials.
Okay.
So we are still getting some of those questions about, wait a second, we didn't hold an annual during when we did the triennial. We're still getting that error. So do you just kind of want to clarify how that's going to look when they're uploading, Brandy? Because they're like, do we need to go back and hold an annual because they exited?
No.
That is not the intent.
and Christy can probably help with this one. So
yeah, and then I was going to say in my next session we'll go over. Yes, we already have
planting for the next session.
Yeah, if we already have that process in place. So if a student is exited, we will tie that exit date and reason to the last IEP transaction meeting at 20. So if a triannual was your last meeting and then you exit the student after that, we will already tie the exit date to that last IEP meeting.
Okay, so and I just want to clarify the difference, right? So when in SACE you're identifying a meeting as an annual and a triennial, that is assuming you're actually conducting not only the triennial evaluation but a full IEP meeting. Okay, so if that's occurring on the same day, then you have to make sure to identify that meeting as both an annual and a triennial. Okay, but if you're not conducting a full IEP and you're only exiting the student as a result of their triennial evaluation, then SACE is going to assist you in populating that exit date on their most recent annual record. Did I say that right, Christine?
Yes, you did. That was great.
Okay. Yeah. So
right.
We can, there's some things in here that are very specific to 167. So if it's super specific to a scenario that you have, obviously do a CALPADS help ticket, but one is popping up with me that I think we can clarify relatively easy. And they're saying, well, do I need to populate this information if the child turns 6 after census day? And so the validation, if you're sending up the record after Census Day, it'll trigger. But if you're only looking at information of students who are on Census Day, then it won't. So the issue is when you sent up the record, the child was 6. And so you should have that information regardless of whenever it was that Census Day is. So on the day you upload the record, the child's 6 and the system's saying, wait a second, they're 6. Today you're uploading the record and you don't have that information in there.
Right. And it is, and I do believe, oh God, I'm hoping that I'm right. I do believe that we also have an input validation error that will trigger if you don't have general education participation range populated for a student who's in kindergarten and who's 5 years old, even if the meeting was after Information Day. Like, because you're continuing to upload these transactions, even if they occurred after Information Day, right? So when you do that and you hold a meeting after Information Day and that student should be in a school age setting, then it's going to probably trigger input validation errors. Minimally, you're going to get it in the end of year. So just fix it.
There were some questions about the virtual setting, working with Medi-Cal billing. I'm not sure what the connection with that is. Again, the virtual setting location is really your up to you to use it and how you think you should use it. This was a request that we had that we were able to fill relatively easily. So we went ahead and did that. Obviously, we got this request during the bulk of the time when school sites were closed, but they were still providing the majority of services virtually. So, and I know most services are still provided this way.
Oh, sorry about that. I just want to say a 2-minute warning because the session will be actually cut off at 20. So I don't want anyone to get cut off in the middle of answering your question.
No problem. Maybe we just take one more. Do you see one more, Brandy, that
Let's see. There's so many. I mean, but and we will try and get all of your questions answered afterwards. I think
I was gonna say, at least for the adopting transaction piece, I mean, I am doing a session on adopting transactions. So
Yay, check
information there.
not plants. Here's an easy question. Does CELPA have access to the SSID extract?
No, not currently. Okay, so CELPA does not have access to the SSID extract, but your CALPADS administrator can provide you the roles to download the SSID extract within your LEAs. Okay, so you can get that role locally as a district level user. But you know, again, it's working with those CALPADS administrators so that they can train you on exactly how to use it and what you're looking for.
So I think that's all we can do, because if we get into another question, we'll probably get cut off in the middle and be like something really important and life-shattering for people. So with that said, again, Christy's going to pull us the Q&A and we will go through it together. There's currently 142 questions in there, plus all the chat. So we will definitely be looking through all of that set of information. Thank you all so much, all 700 of you.
I missed all of you.
We miss you guys. Obviously, we miss coming to your conference and being part of this. So thank you all so much for your time. We really, really appreciate it. I see everyone starting to drop off.
Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Enjoy the conference.